St. Joseph, Heart of a Father. I'm Dina Dell, your host for this last episode in the series as we uncover the litany to St. Joseph. And here to kind of bookend this series, who came with us on episode 1, now on episode 10, is Bishop Michael Duca, the Bishop of the Diocese of Baton Rouge. So grateful that you could join us today.
I am so happy to be here.
Thank you. And conclude this series.
That's right.
And conclude our celebration of the year
That's
of
right.
St. Joseph. And combine in our diocese with the anniversary.
Anniversary, the 60th anniversary.
Of the diocese, who is under the patronage of St.
That's
Joseph.
right.
So it's been a really beautiful year and a beautiful time to, live in gratitude, for the church, the local church here, your ministry, as our bishop, and of course the patronage of St. Joseph, who guides us on our way.
It's always been nice to concentrate on something else other than COVID and all the other things in our world today. Something positive, something hopeful.
Yeah, and the way the litany ends is kind of an accent on the family, and the family of a family, so the pillar of families, and then also the protector of the Holy Church. Mm-hmm. So we're going to kind of go down that pathway today. So pillar of families and protector of the Holy Church. So there are 3 scriptures that kind of stood out. We can't, of course, read them all completely. Hopefully everybody knows the stories anyway, but you're such a...
They're probably the most well-known stories of Scripture.
Yeah, exactly, which is the Nativity passage, when most people are already in church anyway, so which is great. And, we've recently just heard these as Christmas passed a few months ago. But the first one, thinking about pillar of families, and is when the decree goes out, what Caesar Augustus, the whole world as they knew it, right, should be enrolled. This was the first enrollment, so all went to be enrolled to each his hometown. And Joseph, too, went up from Galilee to the town of Nazareth to Judea to the city of David, that is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and family of David, to be enrolled with Mary, his betrothed, who was with child. And while they were there, the time came for her to have her child, and she gave birth to her firstborn son. She wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. There's a whole lineage there. So kind of connect the beauty of the pillar of families with St. Joseph with this story of, the enrollment, the significance of being of the family of David, and kind of the going through all the way the birth of Jesus.
Well, the first thing to recognize, I think, in this story is that there's one sense, and this is an ordinary story of a family, okay? Joseph and Mary are now married. Mary is now pregnant because of the Annunciation. She's becoming she is now the mother of God. Mm-hmm. And of course, from the exterior, though, this is a husband and wife, the wife who is pregnant, living their lives. And like anyone else in a normal life, something extraordinary happens that you don't expect. Mm. There's a census called. Yeah. So now they have to travel. How inopportune. Have to go in the middle of a pregnancy. This is not an easy travel by donkey or whatever it might be for a pregnant woman to go. So there's this ordinariness about it. But in the midst of the ordinariness, we're also seeing another story being played out, which is Joseph going back, and it's kind of revealed in the story, in the ordinary story, he's going back to his hometown, ultimately Bethlehem, which is known as the home of David, the city of David. But of course, that immediately ties him in to the messianic promise that the Messiah would come from the house of David. That's why when you do that long genealogy of names, at the very end is Joseph of the house of David. And this Joseph is not one of the great, magnificent characters of the Scripture. Well, now he is, but he wasn't that. He was just an ordinary guy of the house of David. And here, in the midst of the ordinary life, this extraordinary mystery is being revealed. And being revealed mainly, first of all, because of Joseph's faithfulness to his family and faithfulness to his lineage. And so he's going back now to that place. And being the faithful father, he takes them with him and watches over Mary all the way. And then, of course, then they enroll. They make their census, entry. Yeah. And so, but I'd always see the juxtaposition between the ordinary and the extraordinary being revealed. And when you look at it with eyes of faith, something wonderful and magnificent is happening. Yeah. Which is, of course, a reflection on our own lives. Sometimes we only see the ordinariness of our lives. We don't see how each moment we move and are acting with God's will is moving from grace to grace, and how an extraordinary story is being crafted if we can look on it with eyes of faith.
Yeah.
But Joseph he's part of that. He and Mary are together in that spiritual journey as well as their practical journey of life.
Right.
They're one in that fulfilling the will of God. And in this case, fulfilling the will of God is not necessarily going to do the census, it's being faithful to his family.
Right.
And in that is the story is now God is using the story to reveal ultimately in a simple little manger because of all these facts. Yeah. God is able to even reveal even more deeply the simplicity of Jesus' birth.
Yeah.
So God uses all of this in a way that for us now has become iconic, truly iconic.
Yeah.
That our Savior was born in a manger.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that, connecting the two, because David, we think, oh, King David, although born of humble, means in the beginning, but King David, this great honor man, and then to announce the lineage and that the family lineage of David to the manger, like going from this king, to the humble entry of the king, in this
and of
humble
course,
way.
just like David, Jesus now is starting of humble origin.
Exactly.
But his kingship will be revealed in a different way.
Right.
Than David's kingship.
But okay, and so it takes the pillar of a father to reveal that. So of course God the Father reveals that, but also Joseph as the pillar of that family. Talk a little bit about that term, what it means to be a pillar. I mean, I think of pillars, you think of just, things that are holding things up. But as far as St. Joseph being described as a pillar, what is that? How are we supposed to respond to that?
Well, I mean, I think you just said it right. You said it. It's something, it's a support. It's the foundation, part of a foundation of a building of pillars. Mm-hmm. We don't see them oftentimes. They're hidden in the walls. Yeah. But every house has some type of a pillar that holds it up, whether it be the wall or a singular pillar. Mm-hmm. And that's the family holds together because everyone, the mother, the father, are like pillars in a family. Yeah. And St. Joseph is highlighting the importance of the fatherly presence, mm-hmm. and how part of his stability is not just the practical thing of providing a way of life for his family or support for the family, but he's also a pillar. He's a pillar of faith. Mm. He roots the family along with Mary in a relationship with God, revealing God's presence. Mm-hmm. That's even So I mean, I think that's one of the things I would see him as a pillar. I mean, if you don't have a father and mother are a pillar to a family, but if they don't have something to hold on to as well, they hold on to one another, but together they hold on to what we now would call their sacrament. Yeah. So that God is in the center of that as well. So together, you imagine this kind of triangle of three forming a pillar. One falls out. And Joseph stands out, in some ways you might say, as the more public and the more recognizable pillar, the father of a family. Sometimes the mother, they call it the quiet presence. Yeah. And not all mothers are quiet. Right. Sometimes they're obviously the strength. And in a family where the loss of a father, a single mother, they have to, in a sense, take on some of both those roles in order to build the stability of the family. But St. Joseph, I think, brings that out in his faithfulness.
Yeah, yeah. And moving towards that, too, the next two readings are all from Luke, chapter 2, and verse 21 to 24. And then if you skip to 39 to 32, they talk about the circumcision of Jesus. So his name was given by the angel, right, before he was conceived. And then when the days were completed for purification, the law of Moses, they took him up to Jerusalem and presented him to the Lord. And then they talk about also when they had fulfilled the prescriptions of the law, they returned to Galilee to their own town. And Jesus grew and became strong, filled with wisdom and favor of God. So talk about as far as like protector of like the holy church, and then the pillar of the family, the movement of the rituals that Joseph, as a good, faithful Jew, completed that for his family and for Jesus. Talk about the importance of that.
Well, I was reading that story. I had a kind of unique twist on it a little bit as I was thinking about the presentation in the temple, which is a normal ritual. He's fulfilling his rituals of law and of but they have a spiritual dimension. You know, children are not a parent. They are the children of a parent, but they're not in a sense the possession of a parent.
Right.
And so this act of presenting Jesus in the temple, although of course, again with eyes of faith, this has cosmic consequences. It's also in a simple way saying we offer this child to God, and this child will become who he's supposed to be, not what we want him to be, but who he is in God's eyes. So there's a kind of letting go of the child a little bit and allowing them to grow in the wisdom and grace. But Jesus, of course, as he says, I must be about my Father's business. Well, he's also talking about his heavenly Father here. And so they kind of accept the child and provide everything the child needs. Now, I think what that means in the larger sense of a family is that there is a way in which a family is called to live the destiny they have as they see, answering the ordinary things of life, but also always being open to God's will in their life together. And so oftentimes a father can take one of those roles of leadership in terms of praying with the family, but not just saying prayers, but leading the family in prayer about different decisions that need to be made or choices that can be made, or calling the family to, for example, acts of charity or in volunteer work, or ways in which they have a decision to make, and we're going to need to buy. We have an opportunity to buy this thing, this new TV. If we buy a lesser TV, we can take some of that money and give it to this person down the street that needs some money, okay? So a father can say our life together is not just for our service, but to the service of God as well. And so this idea of handing over Jesus is like handing over their lives to the will of God. Of course, parents would see themselves in their child, as well. So I think there's a dimension of seeing our life as gift. A child is a gift to a family, not a possession. But also to see that our life together as a family is a gift. And seeing that in God's eyes, and what's our will together as God's family. And Joseph is that kind of, again, visible sign. We see Mary as the visible sign of receiving the Lord into the world, but Joseph is the sign of living that family life. Yes, and in response to that, a call to be the protectors of Jesus, but also in terms of them being a call to be a family as God wills them to be.
Yeah, I think the point that you made, that the children are not something to be possessed, but that which is to be loved and received as a gift from God. I think that's very powerful for parents today and of the future. The opportunity to trust in God for surrendering the family, and the child and their life to God, with the hope and the trust that comes with that.
Right.
Because without God, there would be, the child wouldn't exist, right? I mean, there's just like a very practical, faith in that. And how that family moves together. It's not just dad going out to volunteer or mom going out to volunteer. It's like the family together, moving as that unit of that visible sign, of the love of God in family, and then both parents being the pillars of that too. We're going to take a break because we've come to kind of the halfway point, believe it or not. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about Joseph as a protector of the Holy Church, and also how families today can kind of embrace this model of being a pillar, being a protector, and then moving forward in their lives on this pilgrim journey. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to St. Joseph, Heart of a Father. This is our last episode as we dive into the litany to St. Joseph and kind of conclude this year's celebration of the year of St. Joseph in the Diocese of Baton Rouge, as well as our 60th anniversary, which is a blessing. Bishop Michael Duca is here with us today, and we're going to continue to discuss St. Joseph as the protector of the Holy Church and pillar of families and all of that great stuff. I know that there's a lot of opportunity here to talk about family in the present day, and then how families, however families look today, can model, that being a pillar, and then that being the protector of the holy church. So where are you seeing today the opportunities for families to grow, especially pillars together? And then we'll move on to the holy church, the community, the people of God.
Well, first of all, I think is to take Joseph's example of paying attention to the ordinary needs of the family, but also having a mind, having an ear, listening to God, to have a way in which a father in a family leads his family practically, to make sure the bills are paid and all those things, but also sees his life as a life of true vocation, a call from God, and that his family has a purpose beyond just the ordinary, that there's a spiritual purpose. And so that they have an ear, he has an ear, and of course, you can't just say he alone, it'd be with he and his wife, but together they have an ear for the voice of God leading them. Like I said a little bit before, in order to move the family to greater attention to the poor, or maybe in their own lives to live in a way that's more simple, to call themselves to a spirituality of family. That's one way, of course, and it means having the whole family seeing their whole life as a family, as a vocation that is in this conversation with God. So I think that's one of the primary ways. And of course, that's essential for the renewal of the church, that each one of us establish a renewed awareness of God's presence in our life. And in this life of prayer with the Lord, we find the call to conversion, to turn away from sin, but also the call to serve, to love one another. And so that only happens when we make an intentional decision to live the gospel in our daily lives. And I think Joseph was immensely practical. He was a father. He wanted to take care of his family. But he had room in his heart to listen to God's will. And even though his will may not have been to do what he did, he knew from God that what God wanted him to do was the right thing to do. And so he turned his family, seeing things in with a bigger vision. And I think I pointed out when I first started a picture where Joseph is like they're on their journey either to Bethlehem or to Egypt. But one of the ways Mary's looking at Jesus, but Joseph is looking out ahead. He's charting a path, and that path he's charting is partly the practical way of how I'm going to get my family safely from here to there. But he's on that journey because God has put him on that journey. So that combination of both the practical and the spiritual together, I think, is the way in which we practically live our lives of faith. It's not something esoteric. It's not something monastic. It's something very real. And it's messy.
And very public.
And very public. That's right. Families are very public.
Even though they think we have private lives.
That's right.
And so the publicness of the family translates into the community, of the people of God, of church. And the call to people to come together in community.
I think one of the terms we use today is domestic church. And I think this is the key connection, that as the family goes, so goes the church in many ways, because it is in the family that the faith is nurtured, in that relationship between the father. Not to put too fine a point on it, really represents, in some ways, can represent the presence of God in a family. Now, not that the mother doesn't eat it all as well, but there is a way in which a parent, and especially a father, has to accept that role as the one who's going to hand on the faith to their children. And mothers and fathers do it differently, and together they give a more complete presentation. So when a father is praying in a family around the table of a meal and leading the family in prayer, well, that just naturally translates into understanding what we do at the altar in the church. And so how the family goes in the church, so goes the family goes, so goes the church in many ways. And so if Joseph is protecting the family, he's protecting the church as well. And of course there we are just dealing with a larger family that has to have the same dynamics. And a parish has to be taking care of the practical needs of its parishioners, and a priest is taking care of the practical needs of his people. At the same time, he needs to hear the voice of God calling the parish through his leadership, or calling each of the parishioners through their own living to a deeper commitment to loving one another, conversion of heart, and living the gospel.
Yeah.
Same thing, simplifying our life as a parish, having more of an outward look, not just an internal look,
Right.
calling us to charity and love of one another. And so the conversion of both is really the same work of the Spirit, but at different levels.
Yeah.
Because if we're not raising children in family, because primarily you can go to a lot of religious education, you can have a lot of people tell you what to do. Ultimately, you're going to learn more from what you learn and live in your family.
Yes.
That's where the real values show.
Yes.
The parents, well, by the way they live their lives, by the choices they make, they teach the children what is really important. Not what they say, but what we did together. What I did together with my family was much more influential than what I was told.
Yeah.
It's important to know these things, and I learned about the sacraments and all those things.
Yeah.
What keeps me Catholic, I think, more than anything, was the lived experience within my family.
Yeah. Well, and the mission of the church is to evangelize, right? That's what we exist for. And so that mission is also the mission of the family.
Well, that's right.
And evangelization starts at the kitchen table. Actually, at birth, the testimony of the parents and the lived witness of the parents, is testimony for the children, and in a kind of a theological way, but in a more practical way. What you're saying is that the parents emulate the faith to the children, and that's something that it's a lived faith. It's not a textbook faith. It's not something that somebody's telling them. It's the actual lived reality. I mean, the church balances that, the textbook and the lived experience, but the heart of the family and the heartbeat of it comes from the witness of those that are given the gift, to hand on the faith to their children. And you always tell really great stories about your family. I mean, if your dad were here, you would say, "Hey, Dad, you were the pillar of our family."
Yeah.
Like, what would he say? You're like, "Yeah, I am." Like, how was that?
Well, and it wasn't anything really, it stood out, but if I look back on it, I realized that, for example, he oftentimes led prayers at meals.
Yeah.
Whenever we did the Advent wreath, there's always a place for the father to say, of course, father, mother, oldest, youngest. The middle kids got pushed out somehow. They weren't included in the prayers, which I was always glad to lord over my brother and sisters in the middle, But the fact is that he was there. He prayed at the family table. We were always faithfully at Mass. He also had these, I have them now, these Sunday missals. When they used to have missals, really nice set of missals that he would take every Sunday with him to church. Very faithful. Remember the Knights of Columbus, Holy Name Society, always active in the church and the church carnival, very active. So the church was the center of our lives as a family, and not in a way that seemed weird. It just seemed ordinary.
Right.
And so we had that sense of togetherness and unity of faith. And of course, then, as I mentioned, oftentimes those spiritual practices are lived in the family. We have the holy water fonts in the family, the house, the lamb cake I always talk about at Easter.
Yeah.
Little things that were always around that just reinforced. When you walked into our house, you would have immediately known this was a Catholic home.
Yeah, practical reminders, which when you walk into a church building, right, you know that it has sacred art and images.
That's right.
And
it's teaching you. They're all teaching you all the time without you knowing it.
Yeah, and we have a lot of sacred art in our home. I mean, to the point where my husband jokes, it's like if you buy another piece of sacred art, we're going to be called a monastery. But I'm like, okay, that's great, but it's not monastic, because we're definitely not in silence. But I think that says something, as far as like even the little things of having holy water, like, well, you only have holy water at church. No, you can have holy water in your home, and blessing yourselves and blessing the little ones who can't quite reach it, and that those teachable moments. I remember a friend of mine was raising 4 sons, and a basketball team. And she would every day just like open the blinds and talk about God, as the boys were helping her open the blinds and do the dusting and things like that. So I guess it was a practical way for her to get the chores done. But at the same time, she was kind of interjecting, and painting on the faith and the love of God as they're doing the chores. And I think that's just a great witness for families, you know, to remember.
I don't want to paint a holy card picture, because I mean,
Right,
well, for
right.
example, we for a while, every once in a while, the holy water fountains would be really big. We all of a sudden get really excited about it, so we'd be careful, go to church, fill up with a little thing at the back of the church. We come and fill it, you know, and then after a few months, you know, there'd be nothing but dust in there for a while.
Evaporated.
But they stayed there. They stayed there. We knew what they were.
Yeah.
Then every once in a while, we get excited again. We put it back in, you know, and then the next thing was, we need to have a crucifix in our room, and so we'd have it, and really happy about it. But then we kind of forget it was there, but it was always there.
Yeah.
So it was a thing that just was present all the time.
Right.
And but I think it just kind of seeps into your being.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course you follow that up with a response later on. You have a good foundation to build on.
Yeah, yeah. So as far as encouraging families to do that, some people are probably watching going, oh, no, I don't do any of that. Like, it's never too late, right? It's never too late to take a really good, honest look at our family in front of us and ask the Lord, you know, what more, you know, are we called to do, or how can we discern? So how can parents kind of renew that in their families? And even if they do, you know, things like that, like what else is asked of them as families?
Well, you have to be creative in one sense. Things that we grew up with. A lot of families today very seldom or don't always have family meals. We had family meal every night.
Yeah. So
you ask the question, okay, it just doesn't work with our schedule the way things work today. Okay, when do we intentionally come together as a family? Mm-hmm. You have to, first of all, understand the values you want to portray to your children, and you have to create the routine for that to happen, which is not easy, okay? Right. A lot of screaming and gnashing of teeth maybe, but you try to move in those directions and shape the family according to these values. But you have to have those values in mind. You have to kind of, what do we want from our family? What are we missing? Yeah. And begin to try to create that atmosphere that promotes unity in the family, but also the spiritual dimension as well. Mm-hmm. Now, it may look differently in every family because of the demands of schedules and timing and the way we move in so many different directions today. Yeah. But it's possible if we make the intention to do it and realize that you're not going to be able to do it without pushing something else out to make time for it. The family is intentional. It has to be. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, some of the routines that make life less intentional and just everyone's just kind of doing it so we get the support, less and less of those kind of conventions are around anymore. Yes. And every family has to kind of intentionally create a spiritual foundation. Yeah. The church provides. A lot of opportunities for that, going to Mass on Sunday, praying the Rosary together possibly, doing events at the church. Those are all ways in which we kind of can highlight what we do together as a family within our faith. But it can't be just in the church. It has to be in the home. In the domestic church. The domestic church. If you don't come back, if it doesn't come back into the family, it's not really making the difference it should make. Yeah. And the Hispanics have a very good whenever we have a big saint day like Saint Michael feast day, they'll bring their icons of Saint Michael, their pictures to the church. Or Our Lady of Guadalupe, they bring Our Lady of Guadalupe statues, pictures. There's all of them mounded up around the altar. And the priest blesses them. Yeah. They bring them to church with them, and then they take that with them back to their homes. Yeah. So church and family are connected. Yeah. And so we just got to think of it. What we learn in church every day, it's got to bring that and live it in our families. Right. What's to live in our families, we bring to our church. Yeah. That connection is very important. And Joseph really stands as kind of a saint that bridges that gap, that protector of the family, protector of the church. What he lives in the family, we live in the church. And he's a great saint and a practical saint because he just took care of things. He did it. I think at the beginning, I said he was the get-up guy. Yeah. When God had, he got up and did it. Yeah. You know, and no fanfare, no, grumping. He just did it. And out of that created a safe environment for Jesus to grow. Which we're so committed to and grateful for to celebrate this year. We're out of time. Okay. I know that was such a great testimony. I'm so grateful for your ministry to us as our incredible bishop. Thank you. And I'll bribe you later. No. Okay. But no, truly, thank you so much for your witness and your testimony to us daily, in your masses and all that you do for us too. Thank you for being with us during the series as we celebrate and conclude the year of St. Joseph, but continue to model
his life and his mission, and pray the litany, which reinforces beautiful virtues that we can pull out in our lives today. So until next time, God bless you, and stay close to the church.